Welcome to an AMA Boston event. We have a webinar today with one of our sponsors, Sitecore, who I'll tell you more about shortly. But first off, just want to thank you all for joining us today on your lunch hour and go through just a few brief housekeeping items and upcoming events for AMA Boston. I'm Megan McGrath, president of AMA Boston. I've met a lot of you, but if we haven't met virtually yet, pleased to meet you here today. So today's event is called Maximizing for Micro-Moment Marketing, and we are really pleased to have Jill with us as a featured speaker today. Really quickly, if you're new to our community or maybe a member who's just not well acquainted with our board of directors, here are all the faces of the people who make everything happen behind the scenes. These folks, a lot of them are on the call today or at the very least on LinkedIn. If you'd like to get more involved with our community, please feel free to connect them and reach out to any of them here. I'd also encourage you all to introduce yourselves in the chat. If you've been to our events before, you'll know that's part of the drill. This is meant to be educational, but also a networking experience for all of us who are working virtually or at least a little differently these days. And also just want to quickly celebrate all of these faces that you see on the screen. In terms of upcoming events, we have a couple opportunities for you to join us beyond today. On Thursday, April 29th, we're going to have a Cocktails in the Green Room healthcare marketing event. We'll be partnering up with a couple other chapters you see there for that fun session. And then we also have a healthcare panel discussion coming up on Thursday, May 6th. So check out our website, amaboston.org, for more information and to register for any of those events that might interest you and others as well. Please, as a reminder, we'll be sending out a survey at the end. It's really important that we get your feedback on events like this and just take your advice and thoughts into consideration with each passing event. Further housekeeping, please keep your mic muted during the panel discussion, but we'd invite you to participate in the chat throughout. Feel free to ask questions. We'll keep track of those, and we'll primarily visit those towards the end. You'll also have an opportunity at the end of the presentation to unmute and ask questions if you'd prefer to do it that way. Sometimes that's more engaging. And also feel free to tweet at us using hashtag AMA Boston. Our social media team will be manning that channel and others, and we'd love to engage with you there. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and introduce our panelists for today. Jill Grozowski is an award-winning digital marketer with an expertise in personalization, user segmentation, testing, and comprehensive marketing strategies. As a product marketing director at Sitecore, Jill is responsible for helping bring products from concept to commercialization, communicating benefits, product highlights, feature value, and use cases for Sitecore's platform. Special thanks also to Sitecore, our sponsor for today. Sitecore creates human connections between brands and their customer via digital experiences that leverage end-to-end content, seamless commerce, and continuous personalization to enable organizations to thrive in a world where a superior customer experience, or without a superior customer experience, there is no product. So welcome, Jill, and thank you, Sitecore. I'll kick it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan. And thank you, everybody, for joining. Really excited to walk through this content with you. Let me just get my screen share up. And just to confirm, you guys can see everything full screen. We're good. Head nods. Awesome. Okay, cool. So as Megan mentioned, we're going to be talking about maximizing for micro-moment marketing. Thank you, Megan, for the intro. Just a little bit more about me. I've spent about 13 years in the digital customer experience space. As Megan mentioned, I have a strong focus on personalization. So before coming to Sitecore, I was working at an agency in Boston and a couple other places implementing personalization for customers, everything from strategy to defining their personas and segments to getting that implemented, measuring it, things like that. I am from Boston originally. I grew up in Brookline, most recently lived in Quincy, but now I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. And yeah, just a fun fact, I also recently fulfilled my dream of swimming with dolphins. So that's something I wanted to do since I was a little kid, and I finally did it. So anyways, enough about me. Let's get to what you guys are here for. So I want to talk about micro moments and really kind of cover what they are. But before doing that, I just want to set the context for why we're having this conversation and why it's relevant. So here's a stat I think that a lot of us have seen something like this, where Gartner reported by 2020, 81% of marketers expect to be competing mainly on the basis of customer experience. Obviously, we're in 2021, so that time has come, right? So brands are continuing to compete on customer experience. It's not about product price as much anymore. It's not about loyalty. We know, especially through the pandemic, that's really kind of been up in the air. So customer experience is critical to engaging customers and being a successful business. The other thing that's important to note is that, customers are changing, right? Their expectations have evolved at a crazy pace, and especially throughout the last year. And so I think that's really important to note, where this customer we thought would show up maybe 5-10 years from now turned up in 2020 during the pandemic, when everything shifted to digital, and not really by their own choice, right? But driven by a world that needed to switch to digital only engagement in order to survive and thrive. And this customer is really starting to reshape how we market, right? We're no longer in control as marketers. We really have to follow customer cues and understand who these people are. Many cases, they're making decisions without any offline engagement. And these customers want to be inspired, right, via content, via how we decide to interact with them. They want to be assisted through their process. They want to be convinced to make a conversion or to make a purchase, and all through digital channels. And this customer expects engagement with a brand will be easy as well as safe for them, and that they're going to be rewarded for their loyalty. And this customer of the future that has now showed up is really forcing brands to become more experience centric. And so when we start to get a little closer to talking about micro moments, the other thing that's important to note is that obviously consumer behaviors have changed. That customer of the future is here. And with that is a customer who's not moving through the journey the way that we've always thought of it, right? They're using more and more touch points, which means there's not only more data points across the journey where we can collect information, but with each touch point, these customers are expecting consistency of content. They're expecting consistency across interactions. And this means that the customer journey is getting broken down into smaller, more quick hitting touch points to gather pieces of information immediately to then lead to a big decision, as opposed to the customer behavior previously, where there was more consistent browsing in a set of time. And I'm sure we've all done this looking at Google Analytics, what's our time on site, right? And we're seeing that number continuously go down because people are just quickly interacting or looking for information kind of on their own schedule and not necessarily kind of in this linear fashion. And so that brings us to what are micro moments. And it's important to say that micro moments are not something new, right? This is something that Google started to write about in 2015, obviously with the increase in mobile interaction. But really, it's important to talk about now because of that changing consumer behavior, where micro moments occur when people reflexively grab their phones, grab their tablet or their laptop to act on a very specific need at a moment in time, right? They want to learn something, to do something, or discover something. And in these moments, consumers' expectations are higher than ever, right? They want to find that information quickly. Smartphones have trained us to expect that brands will not only deliver immediately, but they're going to deliver exactly what we're looking for. And I'm sure we all know this, anytime you go on a Google search, and it doesn't serve up exactly what you were looking for at the top, it's frustrating, right? And so really, when we think about micro moments too, there's an underlying theme here of not just speed, but also of hyper personalization, and really being able to understand what people are looking for in these different types of micro moments in order to deliver that customization, match that person's intent exactly, and really hyper personalize in order to continue to drive their engagement with your brand. And so when we think about micro moments, there's really 4 micro moments that Google has identified, and we'll see these again later on in the presentation. But I think it's interesting, and it's also, as I talk through them, I think it's interesting for you all to think about these in terms of how they kind of go through the funnel. The first is I want to know when a consumer is exploring, but not necessarily, in purchase mode, right? I'm just trying to do my research, gather information. Of course, there's the go component, looking for a local business when we can get out and about and do that shopping in person on a regular occurrence. But looking for that local business or considering a purchase at a nearby store. If we need something immediately, I want to find the closest place to be able to get that. And then, of course, there's do moments, where they're trying to complete a task or trying something new, and they're looking for information on how to do that and get that action completed. And then, of course, there's buy moments, when someone's ready to make a purchase and they need help either deciding what to buy or where to find that item. So with all that being said, I wanted to just put this in here as well in terms of, what are micro moments and why are we talking about it? Because, as I mentioned in the definition, there's such a focus on hyper personalization. And even going back a couple of statistics, when we look at customers who are expecting consistency across touch points, it matters because 70% of the customer's journey is based on how customers feel that they're being treated across touch points. And the way that we can make customers or consumers feel appreciated or inspired or assisted, as we talked about for that future consumer, a lot of that comes down to the way that we market, the content that we deliver, and the personalization, the way that we personalize the experience, even as someone's going from, laptop to their mobile phone to the tablet, whatever it may be. So it's really critical to talk about micro moments now, even though it's not necessarily the newest concept. And just here in terms of, why micro moments are making a comeback, I think obviously we've talked about that new consumer is here, but just wanted to throw this stat up to demonstrate, that 7 in 10 consumers surveyed say that they shop in micro moments, right? With 35% of those saying that they do it weekly or more often. So this isn't something that's just kind of a fly-by trend. And I think we all can relate to this, right? I'm looking to buy a house and I'm sitting on the couch and I'm like, oh, we need a new media center. I'm on my phone looking at, Ashley Home Furniture or whatever it may be. Just whenever you kind of get that spark, you're trying to then act on it and you want to accomplish it. So another reason to focus on micro moments before we get into kind of how to start to identify those is really to just hit this home. They are small moments in time, right? They might be 10 to 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Again, it's not that kind of, time on site that we've typically seen previously, but they do have a huge impact, especially because customer expectations are high, but patience is not. And again, we're all consumers. We all go through this. If I'm trying to get to a web page and it's taking too long, I'm done, right? I'm over it. I'll either come back to it or I'll look somewhere else. Customers are also always on, obviously we know that in this kind of completely digital world that we're living in. There can be a huge impact on conversions when you're able to capture that micro moment and help that person know, do, go, or buy. It's an opportunity to drive brand awareness, especially in that no state. As I mentioned, think about the funnel. That no, I want to know something is really the top of the funnel when we can capture someone's attention and bring them in. It's a way to connect with customers. And it's really a way to win over customers from competitors. If you're able to identify and deliver on micro moments, but your competitors can't, then you win. So all that being said, we'll go into kind of how to identify micro moments. And I think some of this is stuff that you guys already know, but is important to reiterate when we talk about being able to identify micro moments. The first is to know your customers. You need to know your buyer personas with accuracy. It's such a critical step in terms of understanding who they are, understanding the problems that they're trying to solve, the jobs to be done. I think we've all heard of that, and really understanding, customer demographics, goals, fears, motivations, right? All of these things are going to inform when or how someone's going to interact in a micro moment and really allow you to start to think about where those micro moments will fall for your particular business or your particular company. I think, of course, when it comes to personas, right? Obviously doing the research, customer interviews for insight into what customers are thinking, feeling, all of that. We really need to understand who customers are and do the work, right? And balance our internal thinking of that with that external research to make sure that we're not just reinforcing our own assumptions, but that we truly know who our customers are. And it's important to note too, this isn't a one-time activity, right? We can't just create a persona and be like, that's great. It's a slide that lives in a PowerPoint deck and we can revisit it, once a year, maybe once every other year. These need to be living documents where we're constantly evaluating these against data, looking how our persona demographics or fears or motivations change over time. The second piece that comes in when trying to identify micro moments is really this notion of empathy and being able to do that by mapping the customer experience. When you create a journey map, you can use that to understand where customers are interacting and be able to touch customers at the moment that they're looking for a product or service. You can start to understand what they're searching for in order to find that information, what's bringing them in. You can start to uncover a lot of motivators, right? And this is something to be done in conjunction with personas. This type of exercise also helps you uncover how customers find you, right? Where they go on your site, where they interact in your app in order to get that information, and also where they're spending their most time and which devices and or channels they're using to get there. And also when you start to go through the journey mapping process, it really does allow you to focus on that consistency that's needed, right? That we talked about earlier, and help you deliver a seamless omni-channel experience. You want to understand, where's the starting point, where's the end point, and how is the customer moving through that? What are the time periods in between interactions? Start to understand the different types of channels that they're engaging on. And all of that's going to help you figure out how to identify those micro moments for your target audiences that you defined in your persona research. Now, the next thing I want to talk about in terms of identifying micro moments is a data piece. And I wanted to just put this in here because I think obviously data is not a new topic when it comes to marketing, but when we talk about customers and identifying micro moments, data is such a key piece of this. And we know that happy customers are a key to growth for brands, and customers are willing to provide information and data so that they can receive that personalized experience. So this stat here, 74% of consumers would find living profiles valuable if they could be used to curate the experiences, offers, and products that they receive. So when it comes to identifying micro moments, it's okay to ask the customer for help, to say, hey, can you just tell us a little bit about you so that we can better deliver for both the micro moments and more of the macro moments of your interaction? So with that being said, when it comes to identifying micro moments, you want to focus on the collection and use of first-party data. And this is information, again, it could be a living profile that you're collecting directly from your audience or customers. It can include data that you ask for, right? Through surveys, interviews, NPS scores, perhaps pop-ups on your site where you're soliciting feedback about their experience, if they're able to find what they were looking for. It also involves listening, right? Listening to social media, taking a look at sentiment in social, in online reviews, voice of customer research, of course, tools for eye tracking, heat mapping. Some of those involve a little bit more investment, but can provide a lot of value in terms of what people are looking for, especially when we're talking about micro moments where they are so quick. And then, of course, capturing data, really focusing on a holistic data strategy where you're able to create, and I hate to use the buzzword, but a 360-degree view of the customer. So making sure that you have a single source of truth, that can be your CRM data, bring in social media profile data, also bringing in behavioral data. So really trying to understand in real time how consumers are interacting on a site, on an app, and really starting to gauge their interests, monitoring and capturing clicks, engagement with email, really any of the outbound marketing that we're pushing out, as well as kind of the in-ecosystem interactions that we're facilitating in the experience. So that's just some of how to identify the micro moments, right? It's not prescriptive in the sense of, okay, well, do A, B, C, like these exact tasks, but at a high level, conceptually focusing on knowing your customer kind of across those different points is really critical to being able to pinpoint the micro moments for your particular business. So now, one of the things I want to highlight is the role of content and personalization in micro moments, and really kind of how to act on these micro moments once they've been identified. Hopefully this slide's not too hard to read. I was trying to find the right image and font color, and also cannot take credit for this quote. But I think this is hugely relevant and ties back to what I was mentioning at the beginning. Most companies must realize that they are no longer competing against the guy down the street or the brand that sells similar products. Instead, they're competing with every other experience a customer has. And I think that really resonates, especially when it comes to marketing, whether you're, small, lower mid-market, enterprise business. I think everybody feels this because, again, we're all consumers. The way we interact on Amazon or with our Spotify or Netflix or Uber, the names that we hear so often in terms of who's doing it well, that's all impacting how our customers interact with us, right? And so that's hugely important when we're thinking about how we deliver content and personalization, and making sure that we have a strong foundation of those in order to market for micro moments. Excuse me. So that being said, when it comes to marketing for micro moments, there's kind of 3 key ways to do this. And I'll go into each one of these in a little bit more detail. The first is to be present. The second is to provide utility. And the third is to deliver quickly. So we'll look into each one of those. So in terms of how to be present, this is really focused on content and making sure that you are on the channels that people are interacting across. You want to ensure that there's content across channels, and that it's available during the research phase, but also throughout the funnel. And, I've worked at a number of companies, and I think a lot of times we're always top funnel heavy, right? We're really focused on getting you in, and then the amount of content really starts to dwindle as people get down further in the funnel, and making sure that there's consistency across that is hugely important. The first bullet I put here in terms of being present is a little bit more from an operational standpoint. You want to make sure to centralize your content efforts and make sure your organization has a holistic view of content across channels. Working with something like a centralized content hub that allows you to see, what the email team is doing, what the social team is doing, what the web team is doing, will allow you to see that how holistic your content strategy is, and if there are content gaps. If there are gaps, right, then we're not being present on all the channels that we need to be. So making sure you have that holistic view on the front end is hugely important to being present. Then from there, of course, kind of some more of your traditional tactics. Of course, focus on optimizing content for search. Make sure to understand user search intent for both on and off-site searches. What's driving people to your site? How's paid search performing? But also, when someone gets to your site, how are they using your search, right? Are you not presenting the right information for them? Are we seeing a trend in the types of things people are searching for? That's a key indicator that they can't find it, right? So we're not actually present in that micro moment for them. As I mentioned, ensure that there's content throughout the funnel. Make sure to understand customer context, device, time of day, things like that. That's going to give you information in terms of the micro moments and what people are looking for and when, right? Are people looking for something very different on mobile than they are on desktop, even the same user, right? So really starting to take a look into that, and make sure to provide information that's accurate and useful. And that kind of takes us into our next one as well. So in terms of the next step, which is providing utility, this is really about providing snackable, educational, informative content, right? Because these are micro moments, they're smaller, right? There's less time. So that snackable piece is something that we really need to focus on and really make sure when you're providing utility, it doesn't always have to be a hard sell, right? A lot of times when we looked at those for micro moments, I want to know and I want to do. I want to go, right? These aren't things that people are immediately purchasing, right? There's only one buy micro moment. So of course, there's always a soft selling aspect of it, but by being a trusted voice for a customer when they're looking for information, that's going to help you do the sell in the long term. So make sure to provide that how-to content, provide education, learning, training. Make sure to offer content varieties, right? People want to consume different types of information. Personally, I don't love watching videos on a website, but some people do. And so making sure that you have different types of content that have similar information is important so that you're tailoring the way you're delivering information for that particular person's preference. And a lot of that can be informed by that persona research that we talked about. You might find that your audience literally hates blogs, right? They never interact with it. So you don't even have to focus on it, but you have to do that research and make sure that you do have the variety of content that your customer is seeking. Facilitate self-service. Obviously, this is something that became a much bigger component over the last 12 to 15 months since everything happened at the beginning of last year. We've seen this, of course, through healthcare, but we're seeing more of this with car buying, right? The things that you can do on a car website to really build your car and make that transaction. So definitely being able to facilitate self-service because people want to do more on their own. And then, of course, I think it goes without saying, personalize the experience. Whether this is in real time, across sessions, focusing on personalization is critical when we talk about marketing to micro moments, again, because there's less time to grab someone's attention and we have to make sure that we're delivering the right information for what they need. And personalization is how we deliver it. And obviously, in my intro, I mentioned I'm extremely passionate about personalization. So this could be a whole nother topic that we could talk about in terms of how to get started, personalizing across different budgets, things like that. But absolutely something to keep in the back of your mind if you're not doing it, and if you are doing it, really focusing on how you can continue to scale that and meet the needs of those different personas throughout the journey phases that you'll ultimately identify as part of that research. And so just to level set, I never know kind of how familiar people are with personalization, but there are different types of personalization. The first being explicit personalization. This is delivering a tailored experience based on information that's given or provided by the visitor, right? Really deterministic information, such as name and email address that can be provided in a form fill or a newsletter sign up, previous visit histories, explicit information, buying history, right? A list of the products that they purchased previously. These are all explicit data points that we can use to then keep moving people through their journey, as well as delivering personalized information to them in different micro moments. Then kind of more of a middle ground, there's contextual. This is a known data point about the visitor that could influence their interest or what they're doing. Things like location and device, which we talked about earlier, are ways to deliver contextual personalization. When we're on mobile, we might not have as much time. We don't want to scroll as much, right? We can update and personalize the experience based on the fact that someone's on going to a mobile website, and tailor the personalization while still presenting the right information that we want to get out to them. And then lastly, implicit personalization. This is much more based on behavioral activity, really taking into account someone's interest and how that changes over time. So this can be done by profiling content, based on different topics or taxonomy. Someone on a athletic site might be looking for sporting equipment, and they might be looking for basketballs, right? And then, on a couple more visits, now they're looking at volleyballs. Being able to monitor that real-time change will allow you to deliver dynamic personalization over time and make sure that you're not wasting real estate promoting something that this person's clearly not interested in anymore. So just a little bit about the types of personalization. And then lastly, how to deliver quickly. Make sure to be proactive, prepared, and personalized. And so, this first bullet, focuses on that centralized data, which we talked about earlier. You want to make sure that you have a clean customer profile that you can act on, right? Having that will allow you to identify who someone is. Even if they're anonymous, you can still have some of those kind of implicit cues and then deliver with personalization or some predictive capabilities if AI is something that you are interested in using or are currently using. Making sure, excuse me, to operate seamlessly across channels and locations. As I mentioned kind of a couple of slides ago, that centralization of content. One of the great things when you centralize your content efforts is the ability to break down the silos between all of the different channels that you're putting out content on. To deliver quickly, centralization of content contributes to that because you're able to see what's being put out on a particular channel, and maybe you don't have to go create it from scratch. You can repurpose what someone created for social and now put it in an email. And not only are you saving yourself time, but there's that consistency across touch points that people are looking for. Make sure to know the customer goal and simplify how they will achieve it. A lot of this will come through, again, a merging of the personas and customer journeys, understanding at these different touch points, what do you need to do? If you're coming in and you've clicked here, what's your intent? How can I help you get to the next action as quickly as possible? Excuse me. Make sure to think about performance and accessibility, of course, right? Making sure the site is optimized to load quickly, to deliver information quickly, and then findability is key. Search again becomes such a critical component to this, being able, and it really does tie into being present, right? You want to be top of search. You want someone to find you quickly if they're going through kind of that more organic search route. When they come to your site, if they don't see what they need immediately on your homepage and they do opt to go to search, make sure that the information they're looking for is accessible quickly, right? And that it's findable. And this also speaks to just the UX of a website, right? Or an experience. Really try not to get bogged down in the politics of an organization. You have to think about how your user wants to go through the site and what they're looking for, and making sure that the navigation can really help guide them to information that they need. And so in terms of all of that, and I think we can open it up to the chat. Hopefully I can kind of find a way to navigate through my windows. I would love to hear, before kind of I throw up my slide, or as I'm pulling it up, now that we've talked a little bit about this, I would love to know kind of who you guys think is doing Micromoments well. Are there particular brands that you've interacted with, that you've seen, have a seamless experience across kind of different ways you've moved through the journey with them? So I'll definitely pop that into the chat and we'll take a look at it here in a second. A couple brands here that are doing really well. Starbucks does a really great job across different channels, obviously physical, as well as app purchases. CVS Health, we'll talk about Sephora here in a second. Black & Decker and Lowe's too, and I think we see this a lot from home improvement companies, really do a great job of keeping people engaged and providing information, knowing that they're coming to the store to buy something that they're going to then take home and execute with, right? A lot of times we're looking at DIYers who are trying to complete a project. And so Lowe's and Black & Decker both have really great experiences with how-to information, product recommendations, insights, customer interaction via community, things like that. I'm going to try and get my chat. I don't know. There it is. Okay, awesome. So I think those are definitely some brands there that are doing a great job. And then if we look here, just to elaborate a little bit on Sephora, Sephora's done a really great job in terms of really accommodating those micro moments. And there's a quote from their vice president of interactive media. They said, "We think one of the biggest opportunities that we have in retail is for our customers to leverage their phones as a shopping assistant when they're standing in the store." And so what Sephora has done is to really help shoppers in these micro moments. They designed an app that can pull up product ratings and reviews when they're scanning an item physically in the store, and being able to have access to that information really helps within that moment to help them find what they're looking for and also get that advice from Sephora. So that's just a nice example. And I saw in the chat any examples of B2B. I have to noodle on that, but those are some examples there. So to make sure we have enough time for Q&A, and I know I've gone fast, is just to get to our takeaways. So obviously we talked about be present, provide utility, and deliver quickly. And if we bring it back to the 4 moments that we highlighted previously, just things to remember for our no moments, right? You want to know and target top search terms, right? In terms of being able to meet people when they're exploring, right? But they're not necessarily ready to purchase. Focus on attention grabbing, being able to grab someone and pull them in so that you can provide that information, which of course should be helpful, useful, and relevant. Make sure to provide options to understand the interest, to really kind of gauge what people are looking for. That's going to drive personalization. Provide utility outside of selling. These people are not necessarily in purchase mode, so you don't want to hard sell them on something and turn them away. And really try and deliver on empathy here. When someone's exploring, really try and understand what's motivating them to start that process, and deliver empathy via content and marketing to meet their needs there. In terms of kind of the go, we didn't talk too much about this. This is focused a little bit more on kind of that local business, but really from a marketing perspective, focus on localized information, location-based searches, provide appropriate contact information, store hours, and locations closest to the customer, right? If someone's ready and they want to find a local business, they want to get there as quickly as possible, and they want to have accurate information. They don't want to show up to a store that's not open, even though it says online that it is. Focus on usability, and make sure from this perspective, for local businesses to keep inventory up to date, for different kind of store locations, if it does vary based on location. In terms of do moments, where you're trying to help people complete a task or try something new, use your search metrics to inform content strategy, right? What are people looking for? What are they trying to do? And make sure you have the content to match that. Provide tutorials, videos, how-to articles, different varieties of content. We talked about that self-service. Really try and facilitate self-service. Again, the more brands provide utility, the more you'll become top of mind when a user has to do the next thing or seeking more information to accomplish something. And most importantly, when someone's trying to complete a task, don't force them to start over. This is where that clean data comes in, and personalization is so critical, because I think we've all kind of been on the phone with a cable provider where you have to repeat the same information to 3 or 4 different people, or you entered it in on your phone, and it's frustrating, right? It's a point of friction in the journey. So make sure that you're utilizing your tools to make sure that you're not forcing a customer to start over. And then lastly, when it comes to buying, really, again, focus on personalization here, right? Recommended products for you, understanding who your customers are and what customers like them have done can really power personalization to snag someone and facilitate that purchase in the micro moment. Make sure to highlight reviews. This has become such a point of research for customers across all products, right? Both B2B and B2C. Obviously B2C, you have your Amazon reviews, things like that, and Google reviews. But from a B2B perspective, things like G2, people are doing research and making sure that you're highlighting where you have positive feedback. Use beacon technology or geofencing near a store to facilitate that purchasing. Send offers when someone's within a proximity or certain proximity, I should say, of a particular store. And don't clutter with unnecessary cross promotion. So, there's a fine balance between the first bullet and the last. Recommending products for you, but let's not go crazy with trying to promote every single product we have in our catalog or inventory, right? It is a fine balance because we don't want people to have a point of friction with an oversell or too hard of a sell. So I feel like just gotta take a breath. So thank you. We're gonna open it up for questions. I saw some good chat going on, but couldn't take a look. I was just trying to cruise through. So definitely feel free to shoot me an email. That's my Twitter handle. And then also I'm hiring. Sitecore is hiring. We're looking for 2 product marketing managers for kind of our core DXP, as well as our customer data platform. So if you have any questions on that, definitely also reach out. So just wanted to put that little plug in. So I will stop sharing and bring Megan back, and we'll go through some questions.
Great. So we have a couple questions in the chat we can kick things off with. And then after that, if you want to unmute, feel free as well. So the first question is, can you address how companies should turn their content into a story instead of repeating similar content every time? Repeat customers change over time. How should companies address this?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And I think one of the biggest things when creating content is to make sure that it's not product focused, right? We constantly have to be thinking about the use cases and the stories or the challenges that customers are going through, I should say, and start to pull together a theme of that and be able to create more of a series or a full campaign out of that, and not looking at content as individual pieces, but more, okay, if a customer is going through this journey and they have these questions at these different touch points, I should have content for each of those. So you have a common thread, but you're able to differentiate enough and not repeat similar content, and really kind of still help nurture customers through that.
Great, thank you, Jill. So another question in the chat here. In these COVID times, many retailers, even Starbucks, are opening late, closing earlier, offering curtailed services, things that are not evident on their website. Any way that Sitecore could help companies to be more up to the minute in their hours and services?
That is a great question. Yeah, I mean, from a Sitecore perspective, there's a couple of different ways that we help. Obviously, the centralization of content within a single content tree is hugely helpful. But then both with our Content Hub and XP product, we have headless delivery. So being able to push that information out very quickly across the different channels that someone's looking for that type of information, that's definitely helpful. And I can also take that as a follow-up and provide some more specific information, but it's a great question. But, I think the crux of it is making sure that it's easy for the business to update that information in the system, and then it's easy to deploy that information across the different channels that people are searching for that.
Terrific. Any questions? Do people want to? I think we have one more in the chat. Does anyone want to unmute and ask Jill a question directly? Okay, we'll go over to the chat. I'll continue to be the voice. Here we go. I know that Sitecore is focused on connecting with prospective customers at the right moment when they are ready to buy, yet that seems to be in conflict with these live chat windows that reside on the front page of a website. These chat windows are often intrusive and keep coming back even when ignored. Any thoughts on how companies can improve these?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about that. I agree, right? And it's especially frustrating when you're on mobile and you've told it to go away and it's popping up because you have smaller screen space. I think part of it is making sure that chatbot or these windows, are directly connected to your personalization system, right? Someone clicking X, that's a clear data point that they don't want to interact with that. And then being able to set time limits and really measure kind of, okay, well, when's the next time, is it on the next visit? Is it on 10 visits from now? And being able to do that. I also think we're seeing more sophistication in these chat windows. And I think, organizations will be taking advantage of that more, where AI is becoming such a critical component of that, where I think with AI associated with those, that's going to help streamline and really better identify user patterns that lead to the desire to interact with the chat and then pop up at the appropriate time. But, I agree right now it can be intrusive on some visits for sure.
Yeah, I've definitely had that experience myself. Terrific. Great questions, guys. Any others that you want to pop into the chat or quickly unmute to ask Jill yourself?
I have a question. Great presentation, Jill. Thanks a lot. It's Don Frateroli here in the south end of Boston. You talked a lot about content hubbing. And my previous role, I spent a lot of time on hubbing content that are in various different areas, providing a content operation model around that, and where that content is, what it is along the ideation, development, and distribution process, and then tying ROI back to that content. Can you talk a little about that? I think it's a critical tie into personas, tie into the buyer's journey, where they are in the journey. A lot of companies aren't spending a lot of time on that. I think it's an excellent point.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully let me know if I answer the question appropriately. I mean, I agree. I think, content is the heart and soul of experiences, right? Both digital and physical, what we're presenting from a marketing standpoint, it's all content. And being able to break down content into kind of modular concepts not only helps when trying to repurpose or reuse content, but it facilitates the ability to compose content for different channels, which is huge. And then of course, to the point of kind of ROI on content, a lot of times we're focused on kind of high level performance metrics, new versus returning visitors, which is great, bounce rates, things like that. But what's often overlooked is engagement metrics, and we're not spending enough time on that. And that starts to kind of unveil or reveal, I guess is a better word for that, what content's working and what content's not. And as marketers, we want to be focused on working smarter, not harder for our content. So the more that we measure engagement and we see what content is facilitating conversion, then we can bring that information back into, a content hub or a centralized content location and say, hey, this really worked well. What's in the process of being strategized? Let's use the insights from this content to then iterate, so that every time we're redoing content or producing content, we're using insights to then make it better. So we're constantly putting out the best content that we can and continuing to drive engagement and conversions that way. Does that answer the question, Don?
Yeah, it does. I think it's excellent. I think we there's many ways to summarize content conversion. Like content conversion, as you mentioned, tying that content to what personas they're targeting, what areas of the buyer's journey are they in, top funnel, low funnel, how is it converting there, and how do you summarize that conversion of that content per persona, per campaign?
Sure. Yeah. Makes sense. Of course.
Looks like we have another question in the chat. Thanks, Don. In a perfect world, how many staff members does it take to run a sitecore system on a daily, weekly basis? These experience-based systems are doing more and more, so wondering if staffing needs to keep better pace.
Sure. That's a great question, and I'll give you an answer that might not suffice, but it depends. Right. It depends on what the organization is looking to do, how often you're updating content. It's different for B2B versus B2C, where there's, perhaps more inventory management on the B2C side. B2B has longer sales cycles. So it's hard for me to give specifics. I don't think that you need a massive staff. I worked, one of the customers I used to work with is Ecolab, who's, a $1 billion company, and they had 2 people focused on maintaining their sitecore experience, right? I think it's less about the number of people and how you're able to upskill within the platform and be able to have people focus on content and personalization kind of in conjunction, right? That's all critical to customer experience. There's obviously an analytics piece, whether that's someone who's, in the daily, weekly involvement of sitecores, looking at your broader data ecosystem. It depends. So it can certainly range. I wouldn't say you need an army, that's for sure. And then of course you have to take into account, your IT team as well, from just general kind of website maintenance, but you're going to find that with Sitecore, with really any DXP. So I hope that kind of gives some sort of insight, but it definitely depends.
Fantastic. If you have remaining questions, throw them in the chat now. In the meantime, Jill, how could someone get in touch with you about those positions? Do you have a link that you want to put in the chat or something we can share and follow up?
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and put my email. You can definitely just email me directly if you have any questions, and then I can send over a link to the job postings. Also, if you search for me on LinkedIn, I actually just posted them yesterday with 2 of the links. So, definitely happy to chat about those or answer any questions.
Terrific. Always good to make those connections. So thank you for offering up that information, and thank you for a wonderful presentation today, Jill. Folks, want to wrap by thanking Sitecore, our sponsor, and thanking you guys for showing up to spend this hour with us. Definitely head over to amaboston.org to check out more great upcoming events that we have, like this one you saw today. We will have the recording available after for folks that attended the call today. As well as you'll receive a follow-up survey. So be sure to fill that out. Let us know how we did. Let us know what you loved, you felt neutral about, you'd like to see more of, etc. But terrific presentation. I definitely learned a lot. Also consider reaching out to one of us if you want to get more involved in the community. We have volunteer positions open on some of our teams. If you want to learn marketing skills or maybe just give back if you're an experienced marketer. And also consider becoming a member. Our membership has grown significantly during COVID. Actually, I think it speaks to the power of people wanting to be connected with one another right now and continuing to learn virtually. So thanks again, guys. Helen, anything else you want to mention?
No, I think this was wonderful. Thank you so much, Jill. An amazing presentation. Feels really, connected with, what we need to learn, and the content was awesome. Thank you.
Great. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks again, Jill, and we'll close out and let you guys go scarf down a sandwich before returning back to work.
Awesome. Bye, guys. Thank you.